welcome back to yet another edition of the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Sports podcast editorial, where I, Richard Harris, talk about why I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s to today. One of the biggest differences between today and 80s and 90s sports is anticipation and the over exuberance of the people today talking about athletes and their coming out. I don't mean coming out in that sense. I mean the coming out parties of new athletes. The excitement of seeing somebody perform on the professional level today is bonkers compared to what it was back in the 80s and 90s, and thus that's why I prefer the 80s and 90s. And don't get me wrong, in the 80s and 90s we had generational talent come out and absolutely be spectacular, and generational talent that came out and was terrible. Today, the big news star is a young man, 19 years old, from France named Victor Wembanyama. He's 7'4", 5, 6, 3, whatever. Depends on who's measuring him. And he plays like a guard. And supposedly he is generational. And I'm not trying to disrespect Victor, but we've seen this before. And people don't act like they remember. Or people act like they don't remember. Ralph Sampson, remember that name? Ralph Sampson was a 7'4" center who wanted to be a guard. He shot jump shots. He thought he could dribble. He thought he could do everything that a small guard did in his day. College, he was, 3-time player of the year. He was going to revolutionize basketball. If he'd come out today, he would be Victor Wembanyama. He'd be a multi-billion-dollar athlete because he was that good. Unfortunately, people don't remember Ralph Sampson for his failures because Ralph Sampson in college didn't win the championship. In the NBA, he and Hakeem Olajuwon teamed together and got to the NBA Finals. But we never heard a word about Ralph Sampson after that, which is sad because the potential was exponential. There was another player, a 6'11", 7-foot guy who came to the NBA as a number 1 draft pick, who never materialized into anything. And that, of course, is the great Danny Manning. Danny took his team to a national championship in college, but Danny did nothing worth anything in the NBA because he got hurt. But he was sensational in college. He was a handful. He could not be guarded in college. Unfortunately, he has another person with a lasting negative memory. He was a part of the Olympic team in '88 that lost to Russia, and we gave him in 3rd place, but it was awful. We had David Robinson and Danny Manning, and we could not match up with the Russians. In the 80s, of course, if you want to give it 1979, we had, Wayne Gretzky came out, and Wayne Gretzky was a god. Maybe the greatest young player to play any sport. Because immediately success, Stanley Cup championships within his first 5 years. I think he won 4. I mean, nothing matches that. No one matches that. I mean, Magic Johnson won a championship in '79, in college, and then in the NBA the same year. Well, started the season into the 80. Magic was special as well. 6'9" point guard. He probably was the greatest young player to come in the league because he had great success right away. And we had great anticipation. We wanted to see how Marcus Allen played in the NFL or Bo Jackson played in the NFL. And it's funny, we did not have the same excitement for Lawrence Taylor, who to me is the greatest football player ever to live. Joe Montana. Joe Montana got drafted in the third round. People thought he'd be good, but they didn't think that he would be what he was. John Elway had a lot of hoopla, as did Dan Marino, but Dan Marino dropped so far down in the draft that he became an afterthought, and then all of a sudden shows you why he should have been drafted higher, throwing 48 touchdown passes in the second year. But they were not. I mean, granted, I know today has more outlets to hype people. And tonight, there's a hockey player who people are saying is the second coming of the second coming of the second coming. This kid Bedard is supposedly the real deal. Supposedly he is as good as Gretzky. Supposedly he is good as Connor McDavid. He is supposedly Sid the Kid. In fact, that's who he's going up against. Sidney Crosby was supposed to be all those things. And Sidney Crosby, he has not been those things because of concussions. But to Sidney Crosby's credit, he has hardware. And I'm not just talking about MVPs, I'm talking about championships. And to me, that is the truest measure of them all. That is one of the biggest differences between today and the 80s and 90s. In the 80s and 90s, yes, there are many players who were special and don't have hardware. Barry Sanders, Bo Jackson, right off the top of my head, don't have any hardware other than personal ones. They don't have championships. And I guess that is the separating mechanism of phenoms that become stars. Obviously, Tiger Woods came in, said hello world, and started making statements that made people mad. If Tiger came out today and said and did the same thing he did when he came into the pros in 96, 97, he would be just as big, if not bigger, today, because today everything is fair game. But then again, golf is played by older men too, and they get mad when some young kid comes into the sport and says second sucks. But that's what he said. Second sucks. And I remember how that made people so angry that how dare he say that? How could you? Second doesn't suck. I still got paid $800,000. I still did this. I got points for the season. Well, Tiger was like, listen, I'm here to win. I'm not here to, come in second. It's like the Larry Bird story of when he came to the 3-point shooting contest, he would come in and say, and he would take his jacket off and be like, who's coming in second? He would have been, oh my goodness, if he'd come into the NBA today and didn't have the back issues that he has, oh my, you wouldn't be talking about LeBron as much as you would be. I mean, Larry was different. But I digress because, again, the 80s and 90s, the young super phenoms, they came into the leagues and just flat out made their presence known immediately. Nobody knew how good Michael Jordan was going to be. Many people had said he had no jump shot, so he wasn't going to be a good pro. And so what Michael Jordan did was like, okay, well, if I can't shoot, I'll just dunk on everybody. And went to the rim and dunked on everybody. Nobody knew how good Dominique Wilkins would be in the pros. They were like, Dominique didn't have a jump shot, but Dominique could score. And how was he going to score with all these 7-footers by the rim? Well, Dominique just jumped over them and dunked on them too. Victor is 7'5" and very sinewy, and it's kind of scary for him because he is going to be the target of everyone. Here's the difference between a hockey phenom and a basketball phenom. Hockey phenom, you don't get to see his face. You just see his number on his jersey and his team. And if his team stinks, people will remember that more than how successful he is. Chicago has a history of really good young players who they won championships. And so he is going to have to really up his game to a level that people say that he can do. But it's just freakish that in that sport, you are protected. That's the funny thing when I heard the comment LeBron made about Gretzky and how come he don't get the love that Gretzky does because they have similar qualifications. Hockey, no. It's very difficult to score, number one. It's very difficult to, yeah, you can have an impact on games because if you have the puck most of the time, you're going to have an impact. But the game itself is far more difficult than the NBA. NBA's got only one premise, and that is get the ball to the basket, and if you can get by your guy, you tend to score. In hockey, you have to get by multiple guys in order to score. You got 5 people plus a goaltender in the way whose job is to stop you. And so no matter how flashy, spicy, wonderful you may be, it's a little difficult. And I think this kid is, going to have the world is watching. You hate the one thing about hockey that you got to give them credit for and kind of not credit for. They put the labels on you sometimes a little bit too soon. But a lot of these guys deliver. Eric Lindros, the world was waiting for him to come in and be a super stud. And he was. Concussions ended his career. But it wasn't hockey. I remember I met him. My God, he was ginormous. He was big like LeBron, even though he's only 6'4", but he was just built like a skyscraper. And imagine seeing that guy, 6'4", 225 pounds on skates coming at you with a rocket for a shot. I mean, very impressive. I mean, Bedard's a tiny guy. He ain't a big guy. And so he's not Lindros size. But he's supposedly the goods, and I'm going to hopefully get to see some of it. But my point is, potential. Today, players get paid based on potential. In the 80s and 90s, you earn that paycheck. That's one of Michael Jordan's favorite things to say. We had to earn ours. Today, they give you anything. They come into the league, they're driving Bentleys already. They already got their rewards already. And spend the rest of their life either building it up or tearing it down. He didn't say that part. I say that part. And so, you think about it, there are other athletes I could have brought up in terms of the 80s and 90s who came into the world and of sport and, tore it up. I mean, tennis is very famous for young kids, particularly on the women's side, coming in and being young and being talented and being successful. I mean, the Williams sisters set standards. Excuse me, Martina Hingis, another one. Monica Seles was a young player. Started out at 15. I mean, Tracy Austin, of course, was a super phenom. She didn't win many majors, but she got to some finals and had a pretty decent career. but they were. Sports Illustrated was a big deal magazine back in the day. It still is, kind of. Social media is kind of taking its thunder because now everybody thinks they're Sports Illustrated. We all walk around with just as much knowledge we think we do as Sports Illustrated has. We just don't have the publications or the pictures to back us up. But Sports Illustrated used to point out all the super phenoms and put them on the cover of magazines and, hope that they pan out to be what it is. I mean, Hunter Green was on the cover of Sports Illustrated for baseball, and he supposedly was going to be the LeBron James of baseball. Bryce Harper. I mean, how many we've heard of Bryce Harper since Bryce Harper was 15 years old. And he's now like 20 something, late 20s now. Sports Illustrated made people relevant. And they still kind of do. But I guess what I'm saying is what we're hearing about today ain't nothing new to those of us who paid attention. Victor's special. We're going to find out just how special. Ralph Sampson was special. Major difference between Ralph Sampson and Victor was Ralph Sampson was a 3-time college basketball player of the year. So he put in the work. He just had injuries. And that tends to happen when you're 7'4" and 5 and 6 and 7 and you got knees that not used to you running up and down the court, jumping up and down all the time. And then you start putting on weight to try to balance your body out. And don't work out sometimes. That's what happened with Sampson. And then Sampson got involved in other stuff that totally ended his career. We hope that doesn't happen with Victor. We hope Victor has a great NBA career, and he does. Show that a guy 7'5" has the agility, has the wherewithal, the quickness, the hand skill, the coordination to play as advertised. I just think it's funny that, people are acting like we've never seen this before. And I have. I think a lot of us have too. Bedard, again, we've seen it. Gretzky, Lindros, Crosby, Paul Kariya. Remember Paul Kariya? Paul Kariya won championships. Like that's the bar. And unfortunately, today's sports, that's not the bar. Today's sport is you get a name, and your name needs to mean more than winning a championship. You need to have social awareness. You need to have a platform. Well, Victor's not American, so I don't know if people are going to make him have a platform for whatever. And, as good as Connor Bedard is, hockey players, we don't jump on hockey players like we jump on basketball players, football players, and baseball players in some regards. But if both of these young men are successful, do their thing, then maybe we open up a new world for everybody. Coco Gauff, she's now a major champion. She's 19 years old now. She was a baby when she started. She wasn't hyped as these two guys are, but now she's must-see TV. Maybe these guys will become must-see TV and live up to the hype like the ones came before them. I'm not going to badmouth anyone who was hyped and didn't pan out because I don't pile on people. But my hope and prayer is that these men give us our money's worth and someday live up to the hype.